welcoming you guys to the BR College Football Show. You guys check us out here every Monday around 5 o'clock Eastern, breaking down everything we saw from over the weekend in college football. You can check that out on the BR app or over on the YouTube page there. As always, we want to hear from everybody in the chat. Any questions that you got there, our great production team will get those notes to me. I'm always checking in the YouTube. So if you got questions, comments, concerns, you want to vent about your favorite team, and Lord knows, I'm a proud Notre Dame alum. You can see it in my fun background here. Lots to vent about coming off this weekend. So we want to hear all your thoughts and feelings. Like my therapist says, we have to feel our feelings sometimes first, and then we can work through them as we go along here, and it'll be a great time. So, and guys, not a great time for our friends in Austin. Now, Texas gets the win this last weekend against UTEP, but the question on everyone's mind is going to be around the continued performance of Arch Manning. Should Texas give up on Arch? Obviously, for me, that answer is no. That man is 4 starts into his college football career as an incredibly heralded prospect that I think we've debated in the past on this show. The generational label that's been put on him by some people. My former coworker Dan Orlovsky said it after or before their week 1 game against Ohio State. I might debate in terms of ability, but in pedigree and in what was expected of him as a prospect, he was supposed to live up to it. And the game against UTEP, no disrespect for the Miners, but that was a game where they're at a massive talent disadvantage in this game. And so you expected Texas to come in there and handle their business. They're at this point right now in the AP poll, the 8th ranked team in the country, but a 27-10 win where Arch Manning just 11 of 25 for 114 yards and a touchdown. I understand the rushing touchdowns were there, and that was a big part of how they used it. But this game against an opponent where talent-wise you're nowhere near the same range should have been a great opportunity for a get-right for Arch, and looked like anything but. It looked like, quite honestly, an extension of what we've seen so far this season from him, which is a quarterback that looks decidedly uncomfortable in an offense run by Steve Sarkisian that has always been good at making quarterbacks comfortable. And he didn't look like he was comfortable with the stuff on time, out of structure. Some of the throws were still tough. There's weird mechanical issues with the way that he's gone about this. I know everyone was focused on the wincing the other week, asking Sark questions about if they thought he was injured or not. I don't think it's that. And listen, it's that old thing. If you're truly injured, you shouldn't be out there. But if you're out there, we're going to judge how you play. Oswald 10 couldn't tell if UTEP's defense is good or if UT's offense is just bad. Let's put it this way. I like the UTEP program and the trajectory they've been on with their head coach, but talent-wise, they should not be able to compete with Texas. I know Texas lost 4 starters up front of the offensive line. I understand there's new talent in the skill room again, but this is Texas. You're recruiting better, faster, stronger, bigger, and deeper, especially along the lines of scrimmage since Shark showed up, than anybody else. So that should not be an issue. And even if it was early, like it's not like this felt like it changed or got better. So I still saw some of the same struggles from Arch, and a guy that looks just uncomfortable in the way he's operating an offense that he's been around for a few years now. I get with different players involved, but man, it still just does not look right. And this is the portion of your schedule where you're supposed to be doing that at this point. You get the win against San Jose State. You've got UTEP. Sam Houston coming up this weekend before you get into SEC play. And for a lot of people, and maybe this is a good transition to our next topic of conversation here, but that matchup against Florida, we'll go ahead and dub that the Anxiety Bowl right now, because both sides are going to have some questions that need answers. The chat saying Arch didn't play good in my eyes. We'll get to your Notre Dame questions here coming up in a little bit. ND absolutely did not look great in certain aspects, but I do think there is certainly reason for hope. And of course, why is ND ranked and has no wins? I promise we will get to that as well. ND, just the first team since 1988 to be 0-2 and still be ranked in the top 25. D Washington 52, I believe QB struggle, but it'll be good by the end. I agree. Like, this is kind of a larger conversation about the way that we handle quarterback prospects, especially one like Arch, who was called the next Tim Tebow by my buddy Paul Feinbaum going into the season in a way that's deeply unfair to him, because now he's not allowed to have growing pains. Now he's supposed to be Superman coming right off the rip. Speaking of Superman, let's get to the Florida Gators. Florida, Billy Napier, and the hot seat for both Coach and quarterback coming off a 5-interception game against LSU in the SEC where, listen, I don't think LSU looked like world beaters in this game. 20-10, Brian Kelly very angry about the questioning about his offense after a game where they out and won. But let's focus on DJ Logway, 33 of 49, 287, 1 touchdown and 5 picks in this game. And in this matchup, Garrett Nussmeier on the other side, I think could be the number 1 pick in the draft. I think he's that good so far. Maybe haven't seen it opened up as much in this game, only 220 yards through 1 pick, but able to get some nice chunk plays in the slot in this game, exploit some mismatches there. I would say for the quarterback in DJ Logway, you still saw some of the things that have made him one of the most heralded prospects in a while. Ability-wise, like, he is much closer to a generational talent in just terms of physical ability. Now, in Florida, they've had plenty of those. I mean, my God, Cam Newton lived on this campus. Certainly, Tim Tebow was incredible, even as recently as Anthony Richardson. I mean, the guy was a generational talent, just not a generational quarterback in the way he played on the field. But for DJ, I still saw plenty of good throws in there. Obviously, the zip he has on the ball is second to none, but the decision-making in a lot of those interceptions were processing interceptions. It was not seeing defenders sitting back in zones, throwing the balls in a window where a guy nearby was going to close quickly. That's a guy with tunnel vision that's just not seeing the whole picture right away yet, and so maybe that's putting too much too soon. Butcher the Lagway. Is it Lagway? Lagway? I assume it was Lagway. One of you guys correct me on that. This is what happens when you read and just watch the game tape back and don't necessarily catch the broadcast all the time. So I'm not above learning. You guys can help me out with that one. But that being said, yeah, Florida paid. And listen, the U.S. This is the thing about Florida. Coming off the USF loss, that was absolutely a pay game that they came out and lost. Florida's roster is not as bad as it showed in that game. And you saw that against LSU. Defensively, they were able to go and challenge LSU up front, make Garrett Nussmeier a bit uncomfortable in this game. Couldn't always hold up in the back end. It's Lagway. Bunch of A's. All right, that doesn't necessarily help, but I appreciate the effort. Bingbo, whatever the name was on there. The defense was able to challenge LSU up front, where LSU lost 4 offensive linemen to the NFL after last year. The Napier situation is going to get interesting, though, because DJ, again, I saw flashes enough for the talent where I'm like, all right, there's still something there and plenty to be excited about when this guy gets his legs under him. But the rest of it around him to the Napier point is going to get really interesting because these kinds of losses coupled with what we know is Florida's upcoming schedule on the road at Miami in a game that I firmly believe they're going to lose. Miami looks like a really good football team, built well in the trenches in a way that I think is going to make it really difficult for Florida to do what they were able to do in stymieing LSU up front. The Texas game is interesting, and Texas is still a top 10 ranked team right now, but in the last few weeks hasn't played anybody. I get it was close against Ohio State. The defense is going to keep them in it, but Arch Manning does not look like a quarterback that's built to go out there and have success against a defense, even like Florida's, that might not be nationally ranked as great, but I thought still looked pretty good against an LSU offense that I think is better right now than what Texas is putting out there. Then you're on the road against Texas A&M. Then you got Mississippi State, home versus Georgia, on the road against Ole Miss to end the season, Tennessee at home, Florida State at home. Like, there's just not a lot of easy, safe harbor built into this schedule. And so I don't like to be the guy that fires anybody, but Billy Napier was on the hot seat before the back end of last year. And I just think, man, we probably know how this goes given the schedule going into this year. So going to be a difficult one for that. How do I feel about USC from the chat? Honestly, haven't watched much of them to start the season yet, just because there haven't been a ton of games against quality opponents. I know I'll probably watch the Purdue tape this week because Notre Dame's getting ready to play Purdue this weekend. I know Lincoln Riley can put up points. I know they had that large defensive tackle wearing 0 get a thick 6 this past weekend, which was awesome. So big fan of that, even if it is USC colors, which, again, I don't have any bad feelings about now as an analyst. I don't have to hit anyone for a living anymore. But, so I digress there. I haven't watched a ton of USC yet. I know they're going to put up points and be able to sling it around the yard there this past weekend. I went back and watched, what was it, from a couple of weeks ago? I'll look up their schedule later, but they seem fine. All right. From one to another. So the Florida situation, again, I don't think they're a terrible football team, but with their schedule combined with the inconsistency and a quarterback that's still growing into himself, I don't think that's the right environment for it here. And we'll be very curious what this administration does with Billy Napier and co. coming off that. Let's talk about this Clemson and Georgia Tech action, y'all. Georgia Tech, Brent Key, their head coach, a former offensive line coach, been at the helm for a few years now at this program. Haynes King, this offense, the toughness displayed here, all of that. This was my favorite win of the weekend. And for Clemson, who was a preseason number 4 team who now finds themselves outside of the top 25 rankings, speaking of rankings before, I know someone brought that up with Notre Dame, this is a team that brought back experience on the offensive line, quarterback in Cade Klubnik that a lot of people, not myself, were high on coming up for the NFL draft next year. Defensive prospects that were incredible there's 2, 3 top 15, top 25 picks on that defense, losing 24-21 to Georgia Tech. And on offense for Georgia Tech, it was the Haynes King show, right? 211 yards through the air, 103 on the ground, and one of the grittier performances you'll ever see. I don't know how that guy stands up on Sunday morning. Missed last week's game because of the toll the injuries took from opening night against Colorado. And so I just think that offense was always built to give a team like Clemson trouble, where you've got a bunch of athletes, new defensive structure this year with Tom Allen coming over to an extent, or new signal caller, I should say. But you want to mess them up, a bunch of lateral east-west quickness that they've got there. Again, Jamal Haynes in that backfield provides a bunch of that. The wide receiver room's got speed to burn. All that east-west spread option motion that they use with the quarterback run is a great way to stop athletes' feet in their tracks and make life difficult for them. On the other side, though, that Georgia Tech defense, that was a whole ass whooping. Like, that was as physically dominant a performance as at every level of the defense as you'll see. They took it to Clemson on the line of scrimmage. The secondary came up and tackled. The linebacker level ran and hit. They presented a bunch of different looks to Cade Klubnik, and I think got him uncomfortable pretty early in that game. Cade Klubnik, 1 interception, a fumble lost on a big hit early in that game that gave way to Georgia Tech's first points in the field goal. That was comprehensive in a way that's going to require some soul searching. And I'm going to sell improvement for a lot of teams, right? We're getting ready to talk about Notre Dame team who lost a lot of key playmakers, was different in a lot of areas. It's a little tougher to find with Clemson just because your quarterback's supposed to be veteran on offense, your offensive line, those similar pieces and that stuff. Dabo's been the master of this, though. Like, Clemson will have everyone heaping dirt on them early in the season and somehow still be in Charlotte for the ACC championship and in the college football playoff when it's all said and done. So I'm never going to stick the fork in them, but I was also never as sold on the offensive portion of things. And what Georgia Tech did nothing but further my belief on that front. I thought that was as impressive a performance as we've seen. Where do I think Klubnik will get drafted? I mean, we know most teams in the NFL, when you look at the draft this last spring, we're operating under the idea that this coming quarterback class was a lot deeper and more talented than when we just went through, where, you had Cam Ward the number 1 overall pick out of Miami, and then you had Jackson Dart out of Ole Miss, and everyone else after that was kind of tepid on it. Shedeur Sanders falls to the 5th, all that stuff. So most people, I think, were putting all their chips into this quarterback class. So I still think Cade Klubnik could end up being a guy that gets drafted in the late first round because you've got a lot of quarterback needy teams. I just never saw the trait that was supposed to be the sell for me. I've seen steady improvement for Cade Klubnik over his time at Clemson, but I just never seen a guy where I go, oh yeah, that's the NFL arm that I can't miss, or the accuracy that I can't miss. I know those numbers have improved, but I'm talking in terms of like that next level stuff. I just never saw it. Doesn't mean it's not there, but he just wasn't the guy that jumped out for me. I'm an offensive lineman watching quarterback, so take it for what you will. All right, so Clemson, again, I don't want to say they're done by any means. I was been on the record in the preseason, Georgia Tech, sleeper in the ACC, a team that could absolutely compete now as we've reorged this world where Miami's most people's favorite, Florida State, that win over Alabama, aging even better after week 1. All these things, I think, still put Georgia Tech as a team within shouting distance, especially the way that their schedule lines up now, looking ahead for the Yellow Jackets. After this matchup, they don't have SMU this year. They don't have Miami this year in the regular season. They finish off with the rivalry game against Georgia. They get Syracuse at home. Their road games are Wake Forest, Duke, NC State, and Boston College. So it's a manageable schedule if they play that way. Now, Haynes King's got to stay healthy all year, and that becomes the biggest question given their style of play. So, all right, I've seen a bunch of questions in the chat. Let's rip the Band-Aid off. I'm a Notre Dame grad and alum. Let's talk about Notre Dame. Is Notre Dame built for the playoffs? I haven't seen the new Texas Tech uniforms, but spoiler alert, that is the game I'm most excited to watch this coming weekend for those in the chat. Is Notre Dame built for the playoffs? Right now, the answer is no. And the difficult part with assessing them is your two best resume points were games 1 and 2. And every football team is going to improve over the course of the season. We see a bunch of teams get to iron out the kinks against bad teams early on, but Notre Dame, and the way their schedule lays out as an independent, had their two best games in the first 2 games of the season, the first 3 weeks of the season, because they had that second week bye. Notre Dame's defense cannot count on the same things as last year as early as we expected. The secondary and the pass rush have both been relatively non-existent for Notre Dame outside of Leonard Moore, who's spectacular as a cornerback and deserving of every All-American accolade he's got in the preseason. He is incredible to watch. The rest of that secondary struggled against all the speed that Texas A&M had brought in the portal. Marcel Reed did a great job on that offense, left a few on the table, quite honestly, because accuracy is still improving, but a career high for him in, I believe, 360 passing yards. So the defense for Notre Dame has 1 sack in 2 games. That can't happen. The second half of that game, I think they found something, went back to more of the man-to-man coverage, more of the 5-man pressures, more moving around up front in a way that I think that defensive line needs in order to get home. Offensively, I'm not worried about Notre Dame. I mean, they put up 33 of the 40 points. Notre Dame had a blocked punt for a touchdown to start the game. But Notre Dame was able to put up points against a Texas A&M defense that is well-coached and incredibly talented, especially in the front 7. So C.J. Carr had a couple of freshman moments, he's not a true freshman, but you know what I mean. Had a couple of first-time starter moments, bad interception trying to do too much. The stuff before the half and the 2-minute drill where he calls for the snap inadvertently and it backs them up and takes potential points off the board there. All bad stuff. So with that being said, I don't worry about the offense. They got Jeremiah Love going in this game, almost 150 yards rushing, almost 300 yards passing from a quarterback who's starting his second game in an Irish uniform. That time seems good. The receiver stuff, Malachi Fields, been exactly what they were hoping for as a transfer. So again, Notre Dame's defense, I think, found something in the second half. I just called Arizona State's game this last weekend against Texas State, and I think it's a similar situation. Arizona State went on the road and lost a tough game to Mississippi State in Starkville. They, in the second half of that game, found their identity in the rushing attack. They've got a great room there. Raleek Brown, Kanye Udo were both over 100 yards in that game. And Kenny Dillingham and that staff really felt like going into the following game against Texas State, the one I called, hey, they had a good week of practice. They put that behind themselves, and they found something there they can build on. I think that's the same case for the newly Chris Ash-coordinated Notre Dame defense in the second half, where they went back to some more of the stuff that worked for them last year, and more of the guys there looked like they had that comfort zone found again. And so if Notre Dame can parlay what they did there, and I think only 13 points allowed by that defense in the second half, I think this can be a team that still has a chance to go out and do something. Now, whether they make the playoff, I think ESPN has them as a just under 6% chance of making the playoff, retooled strength of schedule conversations this year. All of that could make that still possible. But at this point, Notre Dame's got to go out there and earn the right to believe that's possible. Here in the chat, with Arch and Logway struggling, are the days of paying 5-star QBs top dollar gone? Mateer Beck showing it's worth spending on other spots and paying a vet quarterback. So this is kind of the gamble in college football that's going on right now. Is Ohio State, Alabama, Notre Dame, Florida, a bunch of these programs that have skewed the transfer portal in favor of staying with homegrown talents, because the price is only going up in the portal for what you got to pay for these quarterbacks, because there is a dearth of talent, and also having to go and do that every year. Notre Dame, as an example, did it the last 2 years with Sam Hartman and then with Riley Leonard last year. That can be difficult in terms of building continuity around your roster. And so now going out and trying to do this, it's a gamble. We're still learning about how to do team building the right way in the NIL and portal era. And so I'm curious to see the results as well. I do think for Notre Dame, it's worked out very well. Ty Simpson's had a couple of really good games here after that initial game, coming off a really good one for Alabama against Wisconsin. So I do think there's reason to believe that we're probably not ever going to be done with that. I think most programs you talk to, even I think paying a vet is the only good if you have a complete team. Probably. But like Miami last year wasn't a complete team. The defense wasn't anywhere near what it is this season. And paying Cam Ward mattered because it could offset that. Like, I think it's always going to be about what is our station as a team? Like, where are we at in the process? And do we have a guy on campus? Like, if you don't have a guy on campus that you've recruited that you believe can go and be the one, then yeah, you're going to be looking at the portal almost every year. But in terms of that, like when you talk to most coaches around the country, and even a team like Texas Tech, I got to call their game a couple weeks ago. When you talk to Joey McGuire and that staff, they brought in I think On3 had them as the number one transfer portal class in the country. But that still is a group, especially Joe McGuire as a Texas high school football Hall of Famer, understands that's still got to be the bedrock for your program, recruiting and retention, all of that. Home user, is the Aggies good? Yes, absolutely. Texas A&M, I think, absolutely well-coached football team on defense, as always. Marcel Reed and the added dimension he gives combined with some better, speedier weapons on the perimeter passing. Yes, I think that can be a live dog in the SEC, no question. So are they good enough to potentially take the number one spot? That could be the next question that we get to here. Teams that could try and come and take Ohio State's spot. So for anyone unfamiliar, looking at the current top 25 rankings as follows: Ohio State still number one, receiving 55 of the first place votes, followed by Penn State, LSU, Miami, Georgia, Oregon, Florida State, Texas, Illinois, and Texas A&M now up in the top 10. Now, of those teams I just mentioned, Ohio State, Penn State, LSU, Miami, and Oregon all get first place votes. So you've got 5 teams that got first place. Georgia, the only one that didn't. Surprising after this one, considering hey, you finally saw that offense go and get some of those deep plays. Zachariah Branch and some of that made great adjustments after Joey Aguilar started off that game on fire for Tennessee. Vintage Kirby Smart and that Georgia defense that are built quite literally to stop offenses like the one that Josh Heupel and Tennessee run. Genuinely surprised that right now the second highest ranked team in the SEC wasn't getting some votes. LSU still sitting there at 3. Like, who can pry Ohio State out of that number one spot at this point? Penn State hasn't necessarily impressed in the ways that we expected so far. Again, another year for Andy Kotelnicki and Drew Aller at quarterback, so a little surprised by that. I think Miami, absolutely capable of being a team that can go do that. Carson Beck's looked really comfortable. This week, going to be another one of those. I mean, remember last year with the Miami win against Florida, did for everybody involved. That was an embarrassment. They were rubbing recruits' noses in it on the sideline. It was a tough scene all around for the Gators. So another week to potentially send that. I think I saw College Game Day there this weekend too. So they've got that one, the matchup against Florida State on the road. That's going to be the big one, though. Like, that's where if all of a sudden they can go and win that one, they'll keep inching up and could be a team that absolutely does that there. And I tell you what, Dan Lanning's Oregon squad, I understand right now, Montana State, Oklahoma State, Northwestern, not going to be the ones that inspire a ton of confidence in people yet, but just seeing the way that Dante Moore's played so far, what we know about the defense, they're always under Dan Lanning. Like, that's a team I wouldn't be surprised as we get going. They got a couple weeks, Oregon State this weekend, and then on the road at Penn State, home versus Indiana. That 2-game stretch to me, kind of going to be the spot where all of a sudden you get the swing state for what Dan Lanning's squad is going to be in 2025. But I generally think, like, talent-wise and what we've seen early in checking the boxes, they can be the team in the mix there. And listen, man, Florida State, they get Kent State, which God help Kent State. So Florida State had a bye last week. Alabama win. East Texas A&M win. I think I saw 77 points, like the most in Florida State history. Kent State coming up this week. Kent State's out of conference. I think they already played Texas Tech. They play Florida State, and I think they play Oklahoma this year. It's wild. I feel for those kids. But then at Virginia, and then we mentioned the Miami game there. Florida State also has to go on the road against Clemson late in the season, on the road at Florida to finish the season off. We'll see what state the Florida program is in by then, to our point about the schedule. So lots more questions than answers there necessarily. But I think based on what we've seen so far, Florida State, I wouldn't be stunned. Texas, I don't think so. Texas A&M could eventually just crack it into the top 10. Illinois got their test this weekend. Indiana in that matchup there. I believe Illinois is on the road at Indiana. Yeah, that's going to be the big, the primetime game on NBC coming up this weekend. So those are the ones right now. I'll still tell you the stuff to keep an eye on here. And why don't we get to that? Georgia being overlooked early in the season. As usual, I agree. And I was signaling that before the season got started that, hey, we might not be talking enough about the Georgia Bulldogs at this point, considering the pedigree. Like, that is an earned status to top college football that squad should absolutely have. And again, you look at this game, just box score reading. Gunnar Stockton over 300 yards in this one, 23 of 31, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, 300 yards passing in this game. Like, all of that helps get off that, like, the fake background. They did a good job with that one. Shout out to the staff here at BR. I thought they did really good with that. But I just thought the response from Georgia this weekend. Joey Aguilar at the helm for Tennessee is unlocking the parts of the offense they haven't had since Hendon Hooker again. Like, with these kinds of spread no-huddle offenses, you need a quarterback with a live arm that can push it down the field. And if you can hit on those shot plays somewhat consistently, you're forcing teams to defend all 53 and third in the field in a way that's borderline impossible, unless you've got personnel like you do at Georgia, where your athletes are so good and deep in the box, you can put 4, 5, 6 guys in there and hold up against the run game stuff that can really get you in trouble when Tennessee's humming. Defensively, both these teams really well coordinated. So I'm with you, chat. Georgia probably not getting enough love in here as Gunnar Stockton takes the reins this season. Let's take a look at the top matchups to watch in week 4. We always love grading the slates around here. The number one circle on my calendar, eye for all, Nico punching air right now. Boy, let me tell you what. I don't know if it was going to look like, genuinely for Nico, like that was part of the issue last year. He's a great athlete, good in the run stuff, but wasn't hitting those deep shots consistently, but overplayed his hand. This offense is always going to give a quarterback a good chance. Joey Aguilar was always going to be someone people were excited about. I certainly don't think he would have been able to necessarily change what's going on at UCLA, because I think a lot of that's driven by the defense. But it'll be really interesting to see what goes on with UCLA now as they fired Deshaun Foster. They were one of the 2 programs. Brent Pry also gone at Virginia Tech. So going to be interesting there. Game to watch this weekend. Texas Tech at Utah. Who, buddy, if you're even mildly interested in trench play for this weekend, these are the 4 names you need to watch. Utah's got a pair of offensive tackles that look like they're NFL ready in Caleb Lamu and Spencer Fano. And Texas Tech has got one of the sickest D-lines that money can buy in college football. On the edge, Romello Heights, the Georgia Tech transfer. David Bailey's the Stanford transfer. I was there 2 weeks ago. 2 of the freakier athletes in person I've ever seen. Sitting in the same room as Romello Heights is terrifying. The notion that other 18 to 22-year-olds have to try and block him is wild. But these guys are capable. Like, this Utah offensive line is also one of the best. Devin Dampier at quarterback for them is a sensational. The New Mexico transfer, I've talked about him on this show before. But he, as a transfer fine, Jason Beck, his offensive coordinator, came from New Mexico with him. So all that comfort, plus what Utah usually is on defense and with this offensive line, a deadly combination going up against that. Skylar Gill-Howard, the defensive tackle for Texas Tech, I think could be like pound for pound the best dude in terms of like polish, motor, hand use, all that. So I am pumped for that matchup here. And Bear Morton on the other side for Texas Tech in that offense. I think have looked good, but I think this getting a grown-up test against a team in Utah where you know what they want to do. Going to load up the box, make sure they're +1 on you in there, strap it up, play single high man, and see if you can go out there and get wins. They've got the guys to do it, but that matchup to me is blockbuster. Then you look at the other ones I mentioned already, Illinois and Indiana coming up on Saturday night. I think that's going to be a great matchup here. Illinois, one of those veteran teams in the sport. Luke Altmaier coming back. Yeah, shout out to the Thick Six. Gotcha, MVP. Told you, the Thick Six I got to call from Skylar Gill-Howard. Incredible. Took my breath away. The Thick Six from the young man at USC. 70 yards at like 370 pounds. No knee drive, all heart. Only 300-plus pounders should wear 0 upon this rock. I'll build my church. Hopefully we get more of that. Honestly, a Thick Six should be the most spiritually welcome in Illinois and Indiana. Grade A Midwest beef in that game. Speaking of that, too, Michigan going on the road to Nebraska. Young quarterbacks that everyone's talked about a lot. Bryce Underwood, get-right game last week after the loss to Oklahoma and that Brent Venables Galaxy brain defense. Certainly the black shirts in Nebraska, going to have something to say about that as he tries to get going. And then Dylan Raiola on the other side against Michigan. I think that one's just an interesting spot for two teams. One in Nebraska, year 3 under Matt Rule is usually where he takes the step for the programs in the past that he's helped revitalize between Temple, Baylor. That's generally where it takes hold. It's your recruits being in there, your time to set the standard, all that stuff. That certainly makes a difference for these guys. So I think that one definitely a big one to watch. Just to, again, I kind of see the development of those quarterbacks. I don't think either team necessarily built to be a contender in the Big Ten right now. I still think that that's a race left for the handful of teams up top, Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon. Maybe the winner of Indiana and Illinois can kind of break through in that, but generally that's sort of where I tend to look. Around the rest of the sport here, South Carolina at Missouri. This one gets really interesting with the status of Lenora Sellers. South Carolina is licking their wounds after a loss to Vanderbilt where, I got news. Vanderbilt's not just some plucky underdog story anymore. It's just a damn good football team. Diego Pavia, one of the most impactful players we've seen in recent college football history. What he coming to this program, along with Clark Lee, who's an alum who loves this place and has sent a different attitude to it altogether, the level of investment around the program, the new stadium facilities, all that stuff goes a long way. But Diego Pavia and the relentless confidence he plays with, saw him throw a block on a reverse that was just sicko stuff. That man is perennially on demon time. So I think with that, that a big win, but a huge part of why that win came is Lenora Sellers was knocked out of that game early on with a head-to-head hit that put him in concussion protocol. So what that's going to look like for him if he's going to be ready this coming weekend against a Missouri team that just got a big win themselves. Now, they beat Louisiana this last week, but the win 2 weeks ago against Kansas, I thought was a big one. I think that Kansas team, sneaky good in the Big 12. When Jalen Daniels has been healthy, they've usually been a live dog. Missouri found a way to win that one. So with them against the South Carolina team that's reeling right now and got embarrassed, 31-7, even with your quarterback. Luke Doty's been there for a while. He's played football for them before. So not being able to lead a scoring drive with him at the helm there says a lot about the importance of Lenora Sellers to that team, but also just now calls into question, hey, what can you do without him on the road against Eli Drinkwitz's Missouri squad? So very serious worries there. Can we throw back up those 4 games again? I honestly forgot which other ones I chose. Looking ahead for the 4 games of this weekend here. I'm doing a little, there we go. Oh, and Florida against Miami. That one is more morbid curiosity. Again, I think part of the reason Florida was able to keep it close against LSU is because right now their O-line is a little bit out of sorts. They're still learning who they are on offense. The defense for LSU rips. That linebacker group that I know Weeks got ejected early for the targeting, but that linebacker group and the transfers they brought in the secondary and D line, really, Blake Baker's calling the hell out of that defense. It's a ton of fun to watch. I would want that defense for my team. As someone that had the fast, aggressive defense last year in South Bend, I would love that unit in the playing for my team any day. But for Florida going up against Miami now, Miami's offensive line, stout. I understand Notre Dame's pass rush called into question a couple of weeks now, but the Miami offensive line is just good. Alex Mirabal, one of the best developers of that position. Mario Cristobal, obviously a former offensive lineman himself. So I think that group and Carson Beck, a lot more veteran and going to make that not a lot more veteran. Again, Garrett Nussmeier is one of the best in the country, but I just think, again, up front's the difference for that team and more consistent weapons in the wide receiver room there. So watching out for that one. That's just, again, more morbid curiosity because I don't think Florida really has what it takes to stick around and win that game. I think Miami's a damn good football team. I think Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor on the other side are going to make life really difficult for DJ Lagway, and that defense got a lot better. New coordinator comes over there. I think structurally they've done some really nice things, and we've seen DJ Lagway still got some eye violation issues that led to all those turnovers, and I think if you give Miami's offense 5 turnovers, you're going to see a lot more points put up on the board than the 20 we saw last week from LSU. So that going to be a big one to watch there. We appreciate all you guys for watching, listening, the chat for buzzing in some questions as we've gone along here today on the BR College Football Show. Again, we're going to be here every Monday, 5 o'clock Eastern, breaking down everything we saw from the weekend, looking ahead to some of what's to come here. We're early in the season right now. I know everyone always wants to talk about the college football playoff. We won't get the first rankings of that till mid to late October. You got plenty of time, especially if your team, Notre Dame's different because without the conference, they don't have a road. But if your team is in a power conference that's got one of those automatic bids for the champion. This year, especially in like the Big 12 that's super deep, the ACC that feels like it's a little tumultuous right now, you still got plenty of opportunities. So don't abandon ship just yet. Don't write off your young quarterbacks of the world just yet. You're building to play your best football in November each and every year. And then last I checked in the calendar, we're still staring at September 15th. So we've got a long way of development to go. And that's here on this show, too. I'll try and be better about pronouncing names of your favorite players and giving you some great information here. Thanks so much for checking us out. We'll see you back here next week.